in preparation for this, it was funny. I was on my way here, and I was on a phone with a friend of mine. We've been friends since sixth grade, right? So over 30 years. And I told him, Sean gave me a call, and he let me know he needed me, for an event. He said, I got two topics for you. You could choose resilience or you can choose co-parenting. And this friend knows the amount of challenges I've had with the mother of my child. And I said, you already know which one I chose, resilience. He's like, I know you did. I was like, you already know what the email said, co-parenting. So here we are. And so that's the thing about co-parenting, is that you find yourself in a situation where you are forced to make choices based on a choice you already made, and you will be making those choices for the rest of your life. This is a person and people that you are connected to forever. And so I'll give a brief overview of some of the things I went through. I was a child of an incarcerated parent. My father went to jail when I was 6. He didn't get out until I was 24. So he missed every basketball game, every high school track meet, every graduation, everything, right? Every bully on the streets. I grew up in inner city Detroit. And, the hood I'm from, you get tested. And sometimes you pass those tests by taking some to the face. Sometimes you pass those tests by putting somebody on their back. But either way, you will get tested. And so I went through all of that without a dad. And so I committed myself that I was going to create a nuclear family. And then we were going to do the things you see on TV where you mark on the wall how tall the kid gets until you move to the new house. I waited until my 30s to get married, and 2 years in, it was over. I found out that it takes two people to live certain dreams. And this co-parenting thing is one of them. So I found myself in situations that I never dreamed of. One of my mentors is here. He's not in the room right now, but he talked about, I remember you having these dreams as this bright-eyed college student and what you wanted to do. And one of the dreams was to have a family, and that was ripped away from me in the sense that I envisioned it. And so what I learned is that you have to then dream the next dream. You can't get stuck on the one that's no longer there. And so, yes, I wanted to have one kids by one woman, and we raised those kids, and we're a nuclear family, but that got taken away. So now I had to decide to create another dream. And what I found is that, sometimes your teammate might not have the same vision as you, might not have the same perspective as you. And as we heard from panels earlier, through the system and other people who support the system, uh, it might not be fair to you. And that's been a lot of my story. And I, will let it rotate, but I've had a lot of challenges in making sure that let me go back. Because my dad was incarcerated and I grew up first with my grandmother, and then at age 8, she lost custody of me, and I went to my mom, and me and my mom to this day still have a strained relationship. So those 10 years of my life were very character building moments, to put it nicely. I understood what it meant as a child to experience difficulty, experience inconsistency, experience poverty. I grew up in Detroit where, 3 letters that scare people, IRS, that's one of them, right? FBI, that's one of them. In Detroit, DPS scared people. If you wanted an education, Detroit Public Schools was not the place you wanted to be, but I found myself in one of those situations. Thankfully, I ran into 3 letters after that, which was MSU, and it changed my life, being a graduate from Sparty. Go Green. All right. And so I give that context that it was literally my dream to create a family, and I was snatched away. But because of my experiences, because I understood the emotional turmoil that you go through when you're a kid and you're torn between 2 households and you're forced to choose this and follow that, and the rules change, I vowed to make sure my daughter wouldn't experience that. And as a part of that vow, I found that I had to take a lot of those arrows. My daughter lives, I won't say a carefree life, but her life is a lot more carefree than mine ever was. But it's in part because some of the arrows I decided to take, some of the stories she hasn't heard, some of the arguments she hasn't been privy to. 2 years ago, I'll never forget, she said, Dad, I really appreciate you and Mom. I said, oh, I appreciate that. She's like, no, I appreciate the fact that you guys don't argue. I said, huh. Huh. Shows what you know, right? But she said, yeah, I hear a lot of parents, they're always arguing and bickering and getting in fighting. You and Mom never argue. And, I'm going to stay in here because she ain't here and take most of the credit for that. Because some of the times we're not arguing, especially in front of her, because I've just had to bite my tongue sometimes. I've had to just take some arrows. I've had to realize that some stories are meant to be shared after 18, which is 743 days from now. Just to let you know. Hey, absolutely. And so I say that to say that, and we're going to talk about this, but there'll be many times where you have to choose. You'll have choices between ego, anger, and vision. And I've had to choose vision. I had to see a future that I want. See a day where I can tell my daughter, hey, you remember when this happened? This is why daddy did this. You remember this is why daddy experienced that. But ego will make you say it in a moment because of your feelings, but that didn't help her. And so I didn't make that. Anger will want you to respond. And I realized that doesn't help either. It also doesn't help when the system is mostly on the other person's side. So you got to, pick your battles. And I'll end with this before I pass the judge. I was thinking about, like, people always say, Dad, why didn't you fight to be in my life? Why didn't you do this? And what I don't think people realize is sometimes the fight comes at a different cost for one side versus the other. Imagine a boxing match, two fighters in the ring. One gets to throw any punch they want to see. Every punch, just throw it. No repercussions. I just get to unload. But the other one, every punch you throw, you got to pay for. That when you get back to the corner, there's a judge outside saying, yeah, I saw you throw 22 punches. You owe us money because you threw those punches. How many punches you going to be throwing? If you know that every punch might indebt you. And then when we apply to this emotionally, financially, otherwise, you're going to pull some punches. And that's what I've had to learn to do. I got to be in the fight like Floyd. I got to be Philly shell. Let me dodge some of these punches because I know I'm going to survive this and be able to tell the story when that day comes. But in that moment, sometimes you can't do it. I'll never forget when she was 4, she came home and she was calling because when she was 2, we got divorced, and my ex-wife went and started dating someone and eventually married that person and started, before they even got married, started calling him dad. And I'm not gonna lie to y'all. The first time she said it, we were at the YMCA. I was picking her up, and then I picked her up. She's like, oh, guess what? My dad said, and I knew she wasn't talking about me. I picked her up like, what did you say? And she had this look of terror in her face, and I was like, oops. So I put her back down. And when I got home, I said, all right, I got to figure out a way to handle this. I got 3 choices: ego, anger, or vision. Anger already showed up. Anger didn't even wait for invitation because that infuriated me, right? And so I decided, I prayed about it, and I said, hey, and I asked her, I said, well, first I talked to her mom because y'all already know what I thought. You got her calling him daddy. And she said, no, she asked. I said, the 4-year-old asked to call this man daddy? She said, yes. I said, let me put the 4-year-old on the phone. Let me talk to her. I said, baby, did you say that? She's like, yeah. I said, why you want to call him daddy? She's like, because I've never had 2 dads before. And I thought that was cool. Changed my entire life. Because I realized I had to put my ego down, put my feelings down. And what God showed me in that moment is that every child wants to and needs to feel the presence of mother and father at all times. And that's what her young heart was yearning for. And because I could not be there, did not take away the fact that she still wanted to feel that. So I had to step back and use vision and say, one day it's going to be okay. She going to always know who dad is, right? And that's where we're at. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Jody to share more.
Dude, thank you for sharing that. One of the things that I think about as I reflect on our journey with our adopted kids is that consistency was a huge, huge challenge for us. When you look at pictures of me and my son when he was younger, he was always like this, always on my shoulder. But we also had kind of this tentative dynamic for the first year because I could see that he really liked me, but he felt guilty for liking me. He felt guilty for loving me, but also loved that I was there and that I was leaning into him, just like your daughter, right? And that your children, especially in that crazy environment. They're trying to figure out what is consistent, where they feel safe, where they feel loved, where they feel seen. And I remember one night, man, the door slammed and my son and my daughter went out the door, and I'm like, what the heck just happened? And about 10 minutes later, my son came back in the door. He said, Dad, you got to go, because I don't know how to help her. And I'm like, okay. So I go out the door. It's like 1 a.m. in the morning, and it is cold. And I'm like, I don't know where to go. So I said, God, which way? Go down, and I turned left. Got to a T out of our neighborhood. So which way? I don't know where she is. Go right. Got down to the next step sign. Which way? Go left. And about 100 feet down the road, there she was on the side of the road. I said, hey, baby. And immediately she got up and started walking away. And so I kept following after her. I go, baby, how can I help? She turned around. She goes, why are you following me? Just leave me alone. I said, baby, I'm not going anywhere. She goes, why do you keep coming after me? Why do you love me? I said, baby, I know what happened in the past with your real dad. I'm not going anywhere. So whether you need me within 3 steps or in your arms or a block away, Daddy's always here. And I think that as I think about a co-parenting environment, your kids have to know that you are always within distance, whether it's in your arms or within the call, because they're looking for that consistency. They're looking for that identity. They're looking for that feeling of worth, of being loved. Because one of the things that she struggled with for years is, why do you love me? Why do I have value? Why do I deserve to be loved? And it's interesting because I have a podcast. It's called Father's Fire, where I explore being a dad, the joys, the challenges, the triumphs, the sorrows of being a dad. And she was my guest about a year ago. And we had this really good conversation. And the title of the podcast is I Let You In. And in this conversation, she said, Daddy, we never really grew until I let you in. And she goes, as I think back on my childhood and being a teen, she goes, I would not want to go through what we went through as a family. I wouldn't want to do that again, but I wouldn't trade what it made us. And your kids are waiting for you to lean in those dark moments when you feel angry and your ego's hurt and all you're doing is clinging on to vision.
You guys have a lot. Man, co-parenting is it's crazy when you really think about it. I hear what you said about your daughter calling another man dad. I never had that feeling or that type of insecurity because I've always felt I felt secure about where I was at. But I've been on the other side where my son, he's not biologically my son, he calls me dad. And it feels good. And it was something a little uncomfortable about it because it wasn't uncomfortable for me. It was, how is his dad going to feel about this? Because I know his dad is out fighting for a relationship. His dad is there, but he's not there. And he looks at life a little bit different. So I came from that and I was wondering, I was like, man, so he said it the other day. So I'm changing my daughter's diaper, and he's like, Daddy, can you show me how to change a diaper? I was like, yeah, I got you. And I noticed he was on the phone. I was like, yo, don't record it. Don't record it. Don't record it. Right. But then I noticed he was on the phone with his dad. He was on FaceTime with his dad. And I was like, oh, snap. I think he just heard me say, I think he just heard him call me dad. And he kept emphasizing, Daddy, can you show me this? Daddy, can you show me this? And I just felt a little off because I was like, I don't want the dad to feel insecure about it. So I was like, yeah, I got you. I was like, go ahead, finish up your conversation with dad. I will do it right. Then he's like, yeah, yeah. And I know his dad heard him because his dad was like, I'll call you back, son. I'll call you back. I'll talk to you later. And I just want to make sure that he always understands that his son is not looking to me. He's looking to me as a father figure. Um, but I never want him to know that I'm not trying to take your place. I'm here to step up for you when you're not here. I'm on your team. When you and my wife are not always seeing eye to eye, I'm here. I'm rooting for you. I'm trying to find a way to make sure that you guys can come to some sort of common ground. I'm just here to support you guys in any way that I possibly can. So I'm just always here to support everybody in any type of way, in any fashion that I possibly can when it comes to being a co-parent. It's not always easy. I have one that's makes it really easy, and I have one not so much, right? And it's tough, right? Nothing is perfect. Nothing is easy. But I come from a really solid family. My dad showed me how to be a father, how to be a man, how to be in your child's life. And I take that every day into stride, and I use it, and I apply it to all of my children. So yeah, that's where I'm at with everything.
Well, that's really good and powerful. Got a question here.
Well, after you do, here you speak about like ego, anger, as I'm sure we've all experienced it. I like what you said, just in the middle, like in those moments, you have to figure out how to see past the ego, see past the anger, and remember the vision. How do you remember the vision?
Oh, dude, I love that question. I'm gonna be straight up honest with you. Before we adopted kids, I thought I was a great dad. In fact, I probably was a little bit arrogant and a little proud. And then we adopted kids, and it has been the most beautiful and the most difficult thing I've ever done. It has revealed the ugly in me, but it has revealed the beautiful and the strong in me. And what I've had to do is I've had to realize that I had to become a different dad. The way I was parenting before would not work for my two new kids. And so I had to become more than I was before. I had to become the dad that they needed. And in the process, I needed to become a different dad for my other kids. Because what ended up happening is I had two new kiddos that God brought into our life that had a lot of pain and trauma and heartache, that introduced pain and trauma and heartache into our home. And so I had to really be very purposeful about how I parented each one of my kids. And I had to change. I had to become more than I was before. And that was hard. But it enabled me to look at myself with authenticity and go, yo, Jody, in this moment, you were not at your best. And I think in those moments when you're not at your best, one, not only do you have to be authentic with yourself. In fact, I remember one experience with my dad. I'm the oldest of 8 kids. And when I was about 10, me and my brother got into a pretty nasty fight. And my dad blew up. I mean, he just blew up. And he stormed out of the house. And my mom put us to bed that night. And this little 10-year-old heart could not sleep because I felt bad for what I did with my brother. I felt bad for making my dad explode. And all of a sudden, in the midst of that tumultuous processing as a kid, my door opened and my dad came in and he sat on the edge of the bed. And he said, son, I want to apologize to you. Because in that moment, I was not the dad that I need to be, and I'm sorry. And I think sometimes we as dads need to be able to have the humility and courage to tell our kids, you know what? I'm sorry. I'm learning to be a dad. And I've told that to my kids. It's like, I'm not a perfect dad, but I try to love you perfectly. And I hope you feel that in everything that I do.
That was a great question. I kind of wanted to piggyback on it a little bit because you talked about choosing vision. So part of when I was younger, I was bounced between. I grew up with my grandmother. Incident happened where she gained custody of me. I was this close to being in the foster care system. She grabbed me out. So I was about 1 until I was about 8, where she lost custody of me. And I'll never forget one of the challenges is when my mom came to pick me up because I would visit my mom who had my 2 brothers every other weekend. And one time she came to pick me up, and I always knew how to code switch. When I was around my mom, I said, "My grandma says." And when I was back with my grandmother felt like my mom. So I said, "Mom, Ma," right? And one time, my little 8-year-old brain forgot the code switch. She's there picking me up. Usually it's bang, bang, but for some reason, it took a little time. So I forgot something in the house. I said, "Ma, did I forget?" And when I got in that car and my mother said, "You called her what?" It froze me because I said, "This is not my fault. I'm 8. I didn't ask to be put in this situation." And I felt torn the entire time. All the way up until when I was in high school. I'll never forget one time I was, teenager, going through stuff, good student, having a bad time. And my favorite teacher was like, "What is going on with you, kid? You're not doing your work anymore, you're doing that." And one time, both my mother and grandma showed up at the high school at the same time, and she saw the dynamic, and she said, "I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." And what she saw was my mother made the mistake of putting her feelings above my needs. And we talked about this in prep that as a co-parent, you have to put that baby's feelings above your needs. I don't need you to only call me daddy if it's gonna hurt your feelings. I'm a grown man. I can take that blow. I can live with that. Plus, I don't think y'all gonna stay together, and that happened. But that's another topic, right? They didn't last. They just got a divorce last year. But I'm gonna be around forever as long as God puts breath in my body. But I could take that blow. But she saw the dynamic, and because that happened to me, I didn't want it to happen to my daughter. To this day, she still was ironic. Is post divorce, she now calls him stepdad. In the back of my head, I said, I remember wasn't nothing step in this house. I remember that. I remember that speech because I called him stepdaddy, and my ex-wife was like, "Ain't nothing step in this house." I said, "Okay, we'll see. Take a couple more steps." But what happened is that's what I mean by vision. I knew one day I'm going to outlast you. I knew one day I'm built for the long haul. I'm built to take the blows and keep going. And as long as I put her needs above my ego, and I'll be super transparent to borrow from my brother James in the previous session, I sit in front of you right now in arrears for child support. Not because I've been supporting my child, but because I didn't get the money to the courts first. Because when the last 2 camps she went to, I couldn't pay child support to pay. I paid directly to the camp, and they don't care about that. Sometimes you got to know the rules, and they're going by their rules. That's cool. But if you need the camp, and I got to take the hit, I'll take the hit, and I'm gonna keep on trucking. Because guess what? One day I'm gonna tell the story, and the story is gonna be I overcame it all. I stood tall because I kept choosing vision, even though anger be around. I ain't gonna lie, because emotionally, I told you guys a story. That was my dream. I wanted to be. I was there my ex-wife had a C-section. I was there the second they pulled her out. I've been there from that second. And so when that got snatched away, I got to find another way. And a life coach told me this one time. There were fires in California, like terrible wildfires, the type that goes on for like weeks. And he said, DeAndre, I want you to know this. In life, the fire will burn us all. Some people are going to tell a story where it set them back for 2 weeks. Some are going to tell a story where it set them back for 2 months, some 2 years, and some 2 decades. The fire doesn't decide which story you tell. You do.
Well, in addition to that about fire, the same fire that consumes refines. You choose. And I was thinking about a conversation I had with my brother who went through a divorce. And right before he got divorced, he and his ex-wife had a big blow up about she came into the house late. He didn't know where she was. And their youngest daughter was sitting in his lap. And she goes, "Why's she up? Why's she not in bed? It's past bedtime. You know she's up here just for attention." He's like, "You're right. She needs daddy's attention." I think a lot of times we, as both parents that have been together their entire life or co-parenting, trying to figure out this dynamic, we have these expectations and rules that sometimes you got to kick out the door and give your kid that time that they need. Because sometimes they need daddy time. Sometimes they need mommy time. And it's okay to miss bedtime.
Any other questions?
So, you talked about, the vision, right? Staying focused on the vision, meaning that sometimes I have to pull my punches, right? In the same parallel, we also talked about making sure that we're focused on doing what's best for the child. Sometimes those punches that we pull aren't always best for the child, but we're focused on the vision. So where do you find that balance? Or how do you maintain that balance where the vision is still in alignment, but I'm making sure that I'm not pulling too many punches, because me pulling punches is not always in the best interest of my child. It's more in the best interest that I just don't want to go pay that fine or get in trouble.
Let's go see that judge. So real quick on that, I agree with that 1,000%, because there are some punches that I did have to let loose because the other side will see that you're not throwing punches and they'll just keep taking more ground. And so there was one instance where it was like, oh, we decided she's not going to come and visit this time because we got this going on. I said, hold on. And it was important because real quick, I saw a study. It says that intelligence in a child's intelligence comes from the mom, and their confidence and emotional control comes from the dad. So I had to show her, you got to be confident and say, hey, look, there's a court order. And I know what you got going on, whatever, but she need to come here because that's the court order. We're going to follow the rules. And it was important for her to see dad step up and say, no, we're going to follow these rules, as opposed to always be passive. So that's a punch that I couldn't pull, because that would have been, and that the child would have been fine either way. But for the sake of the long term, I had to follow through that. And